Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TPN podcast, joined by my good old host, Tommy Bowyer. Has it been another month since the last podcast, or have we actually tried to make it less weekly, more weekly, as we promised?
I think it's been 2 weeks, maybe
God.
3 weeks. This is the last
Yeah.
podcast,
Did better than
but
last
that's
time, at
just
least.
it's a bit harder to do them as regularly because obviously we're both working and do
Yeah, we're
different
both
things. At different
working men, paying taxes
fucking
to
men.
this country. Actually, no, I don't work enough for that.
Got to earn that money. Got to earn that bread.
Apparently,
Three
the link
weeks.
don't work. Yes, it does. Anyway, so what's happening this week? What's happened this week? Has the world Has the world collapsed again?
At the moment, the world is going all right, surprisingly, from what it looks like. Everyone seems to be coping with the current situation, and things are a lot better than they were a couple of weeks ago. I think we've established that. For one on where I work in retail, panic buying has really stopped now. Feels like it's going back to normal, which is the which is a little bit of the problem because everyone seems to think it's back to normal now when it's not really 100% back to normal. I think a lot of people seem to think lockdown's over. And of course, I don't know if you've experienced this, Matthew. It's not over, but people seem to think it is
No,
over.
people don't know what social distancing means.
No, I've noticed that.
For example, I had an evening stroll on the coast, Hunstanton Beach way, and Hunstanton Beach way, all the ice cream shops open and stuff, and people just don't give a shit. They're back to the usual tourist season as usual, where they think they can just walk everywhere, and which is annoying at any time of the year and in normal circumstances. I hate the tourists because of how they have disregard for any sort of personal space anyway. But even this year, where it's important to actually respect people's personal space as a matter of necessity of 2 meters, but people still have gone back as in, oh, it's a nice summer day, we're going to go up on holiday to the coast, and yeah.
See what Matthew is showing there is what coastal people are like because they because we have this every year. I think Matthew's no different from anyone else who lives around the coast. You get sick of seeing tourists everywhere because you just do because they're just everywhere and they have no sense of personal space. However, I must say that I live in Heacham, and on Heacham Beach, surprisingly, the majority of people are keeping to the social distancing. I mean, in different groups. I mean, you can get
Not
groups of like
Hunstanton.
7 or 9 or even 10 people where it's like, yeah, that's obviously against the rules. However, in terms of those groups keeping to themselves and trying to keep away from others, I think in terms of where I live, people are actually doing it a lot better in coastal areas in the countryside, more so than in the big cities like Birmingham, London, places like
Oh
that. I
yeah,
think
because
in the
Primark's
yeah,
essential shopping.
yeah, in the countryside, I think people are observing the restrictions a lot better. However, I still think the main problem is in supermarkets and shops in general now. People have no sense of personal space. I work in retail, and I can say, from first-hand experience, that people have no respect for staff's personal space
No.
or protecting their. They come right up to you like that to speak to you, and it's just with all this been going on, you think, look, just give us a bit of personal space.
Yeah.
We're human beings as well. We want to protect our families and our health, and I think people seem to not understand that. I think the problem, we live in the countryside, and I'm not saying the coronavirus hasn't affected the countryside, but we do live in a bit of a bubble down here.
Yeah.
We haven't seen the extent of coronavirus down in the countryside compared to what they've experienced in London, for example.
Yeah.
And that might be why different places in the UK have different attitudes towards lockdown and the easing of lockdown, because we've all experienced it at a different rate. Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah. Still, the tourists are still idiots and deserve to be. No, we're not going to go get into
No, let's not. Let's,
we're not
let's
going to
not.
get into that one. But yeah, right, especially Stanton being a tourist hotspot as they call it. Like just the amount of people going out and like I noticed like just a lot of people they just like when they clearly can do social distancing and choose not and clearly like you're walking down the you're walking along the coast and like oh yeah, there's plenty of room but no what do they choose to do walk directly you like almost into you when clearly you're able to there's enough room to do social distancing but people just I don't know what's with some people they just choose not to just they choose to just get in your faces when there is the room there are the provisions for social distancing in place.
Yeah, I think I think the problem is, I mean, when this started, everyone said, "Oh, this is going to change how people think. People are going to be. It's going to be a kinder and more gentle society after all this. People are going to have more respect for like key workers and the NHS." And already, as lockdown is being easing, I think you're seeing that people haven't learnt from this and are just going back to the way they were before.
Yeah.
We don't have any claps for the NHS on Thursdays anymore or anything like that. As I keep going on about this, but it's because I work in retail. Customer more. I used to get not every. I used to get the odd thank you from someone for like keeping the store being kept open during this crisis and all the stuff we were doing. We don't get any thank yous from anyone anymore. If anything, people are getting worse now. They expect us to do things
Yeah.
in quicker times because lockdown's over. And I think that's the main problem. Everyone seems to think that this crisis is over. And the fact is, it's not over. When it comes to winter, which that's going to be if a second wave is going to hit, it will hit in winter because much like the flu does, you'll have another wave of coronavirus symptoms in the winter months. And I think people are making this worse because they seem to just think it's over.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we can go outside, we can do whatever the hell we want now. That's not the case. People need to follow the government's advice in order to safely get through this crisis with as little deaths as possible. I think people just aren't learning. They haven't learned from this, not
Oh
one
no.
bit.
No, people are still, people as usual, and no one learns. In the end, as cynical as it may seem right now, but yeah. Well, you know, shops are open again. We saw massive queues for Primark, as you can't buy
Yeah,
cheap
I
shit
can see
online.
that.
Oh,
I
look at that! We're gonna go to Primark because you can get socks for £1 and t-shirts for £5. Because not like you can order it online for the same price, if not cheaper. But there we are.
mm,
Everyone had to rush to Primark. Boris is
yeah,
expected
we
to
live
announce, you know,
the
further
nearest the
relaxations
nearest
of the rules as well tomorrow, with pubs meant to be reopening soon as well. So
yes.
we're gonna get into that in a little bit on the easing of lockdown rules, but people are this is speculatory language here, because Boris hasn't actually said anything. Of they think he's gonna go with a 1 meter plus rule, which we'll get into a little bit. Yeah, Tommy, what were you trying to say then?
Well, I was going to say the nearest like shopping place for us is Kings Lynn Town Centre. And Matthew's right. I think it was last Monday outside Primark. There was like, it must have. Well, it was just there was low. The queue was massive. It was like it nearly went right through the town centre. This queue, and it makes you wonder. Really, like, is it that important to you? And God knows what's going to happen when the restaurants and that are open. People are going to be flocking down to these
Hmm.
places.
Fourth of July.
The pub. Yeah, but that's the problem. I mean, if they're like that over Primark, just wait till the pubs are open. The hairdressers are open.
Oh
People
God,
will
yeah.
just be going. People will just be going mad and running in there. I mean, I'm lucky because where I have my haircut they have an appointment system, so you have an appointment and then you go to that and then book another appointment. So that's, but I think you go to a barber's, Matthew, and it's a little bit harder. Some barbers are just walk-in
Well,
barbers,
not
aren't they?
from no. The one I'd usually go to is book by appointment. It's proper addresses I go to. But a lot of I used to always go to just normal walk-in barbers like before, and that places like that where they're not appointment based. They're just mass haircut. You go in, sit down, get your haircut, walk out, that sort of thing. Yeah, everyone's going to be rushing, and everyone's going to be, well, I don't know. There's going to be a massive rush all at once.
I think even walk-in barbers are going to have to abandon their policies and have appointments, because
Yeah,
I think that's the only thing you're going to really be able to control. It's much like pubs and restaurants. Maybe they should just work by appointment basis. They shouldn't have people just come in. But I think the problem they have with such as places like here that it's a coastal area, heavily dependent on tourism, holidaymakers generally don't make appointments for restaurants. They walk
no,
in the evening.
yeah,
So I think that's the problem they're going to have. Yeah, you could make it all done by appointments. However, then you limit your amount of business because some people just won't make appointments and will
yeah.
just turn up. I think all these businesses are going to struggle in how they control and conform to the social distancing measures while making sure that they don't limit the amount of profit they can make.
Yes. So people think the way they're going to do this is that they're going to change the social distancing rules to 1 meters, as that's
Yeah,
what
1 meter plus.
that's what they're calling it. But they're expecting to change it, so instead of having to stick 2 meters apart, it's going to go down to 1 meter. But the recommendation of 2 meters was to help stop the spread, as the minimum you should be away from someone to not catch it, essentially. And well, what's the point of going down to 1 meter? If I'm being honest with you, what is the actual point of the social distancing being reduced? Because if you're 1 meter, that's the effectiveness of social distancing is not really, I don't know, not very beneficial, or you won't really
Well, I'll tell
feel
you
the
why,
effects of it.
because a lot of European countries didn't have the 2 meter rule; they had the 1 meter rule because they said 1 meter was sufficient enough.
Yeah,
So no, we're like one of the only countries which has implied the 2 meter rule, and it's obviously had a positive impact because the number of deaths and infected are going down each day. However, I think Boris has been pushed into a little bit of a corner here because a lot of conservative backbenchers, the really old ones who have been there for decades, have this thing about pubs and restaurants and other small businesses being
very good
open
point.
that would be difficult for them to comply with 2 meter social distancing. So they all want it to go down to 1 meter in order for more businesses to open. Because let's face it, the main reason we're trying to ease, people want lockdown eased quicker and quicker, is because we're trying to save the economy.
Yeah,
We want these businesses open because we know if we miss out on, let's say we didn't open restaurants and businesses until late August or early August even. Think of how much money those businesses would have lost because we make a lot of money in the summer months. Especially, it's very warm. This week is supposed to be very warm, so
yeah, it's
just
going to
think
be
how much money
hottest
restaurants.
of the year this week.
Yeah, so just think how much money business like pubs and restaurants would be making at times like this. So I think he's been pushed into a little bit of a corner here because he's got the opposition telling him to reduce it by 1 meter. He's got his own MPs telling him to reduce it by 1 meter. Keir Starmer's just saying whatever the media tell him to say. So I, I feel like I know this is a good decision, but will it make a lot of a difference? Not
Mm,
really. It's not really 1 meter, 2 meter. It's still you've got to do social distancing. You can't not do it, but people aren't listening to the 2 meter one, so
no,
I don't know how they listen to the 1 meter one.
no. In a sense, it sort of feels like lockdown's over, but it's not. But it is. But it, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to
Yeah,
properly judge.
Yeah, I mean, when I meet up with people, family and friends, I do try and keep to the 2 meter social distancing. However, it is difficult. Sometimes you forget that the crisis is going on. As strange as it sounds, sometimes you forget the crisis is still happening. So you just like, oh, I'm supposed to be like social distancing.
Yeah,
So I think that, as I said, I'm going to bring it back to what I said at the beginning. The problem you have is a lot of people seem to think this crisis is over. It's far from over. Until a vaccine's found, we're nowhere near finishing this crisis or getting over it. The problem we're having is we're just trying to save the economy because I don't know how much the economy we went down, didn't we? Growth has gone like
yeah.
right
The
right
economy's
down.
shrunk by, was it 10 or 20%,
I think
or
it was
projected
twenty
to, should I
percent.
say?
And this is happening worldwide. America entered recession a couple of weeks ago, so
Yeah,
there are problems that we're all facing. I think what people, I mean, I saw a poll that said Boris Johnson has negative ratings as prime minister for the first time since he took over, which is not surprising because during a crisis, you get behind the leader, and then a couple of months down the line, you start,
yeah,
saying, "Oh, well, someone else could have done better." And I think about 56% of the population said that the government's handled the coronavirus crisis badly. Now, I would dispute that because this was an unforeseen crisis which no one really knew how to deal with, and I think luck plays a large part in it. Some countries have been very lucky; the governments have been very lucky in their approaches, and other governments haven't been so lucky. I think we haven't handled it. We've handled it. We haven't done a good job. We haven't done a bad job. We've just handled it as it comes along. And for loads of people saying Boris Johnson, I mean, Keir Starmer saying Boris Johnson keeps making U turns. In a crisis such as this, sometimes you have to make U turns. You do what's best. You don't stick to a plan if new evidence presents itself to show that plan isn't working. So if dealing with this crisis means he has to do a couple of U turns, I think it's worth it as long as we get out of this crisis sooner rather than later.
yeah. We'll have to see what Boris says tomorrow on just how they're going to do it, what they're going to do social distancing, but which is going to come tomorrow. So we'll keep everyone informed on just what's going on in the world and see what we think of it when we next do another TPN podcast later during the
Yes.
week. So yeah, we'll update on the lockdown, the flow of the economy, pissheads going back to their place of worship, Weatherspoons.
Well, not just piss heads. I like Weatherspoons. You like
Yes, but do you
Weatherspoons.
go down in the morning for your
We all
Weatherspoons
like Weatherspoons.
breakfast, your full English fry up and a pint of Carlings at 10 o'clock in the morning, not at night?
So anyway,
Um,
moving on.
moving
As
on.
such,
Do you know what we haven't talked about in a while?
what?
Brexit.
Come on, Brexit. Oh God.
Brexit. Yeah, we haven't talked about Brexit for a while, have we?
No, we haven't. We haven't.
Do you
Thank
know
God
what's
for
happening
that.
with Brexit?
Well, I am our
I do,
government's
but not many people actually do.
Michael Gove basically came out and said, was it last week or a couple of weeks ago now? He said, he basically said we're not extending the transition period beyond the 31st. He said, no, we're not doing it. We were elected to leave on a specific date, and we will be sticking to that timetable. So the EU have gone into a bit of a meltdown about this because the EU are used to dealing with Theresa May and like a
Yes.
minority government. So the EU just thought they'd use their fear mongering tactics, and we'd jump through hoops for them. However, that's not happened. If anything, we're in a much stronger position than the EU are in terms of Brexit now. And you saw Michel Barnier kind of come out,
Oh, he
and
wasn't
I,
happy
I
with us.
can't stand Barnier for the simple reason we come out and say one thing like, the talks are going good. And
No.
even if the talks are progressing, he comes out and says, yeah, they're not going well. But I think even if we came out and said talks aren't going well, he'd come out and say, yeah, they're going really good. He says the opposite of whatever we say just because he can, which is really, really annoying.
Yeah, I think that the position that this government's been in the Brexit talks, while not being massively reported in the news because of everything else, um, I think this sort of stuff doesn't really get blasted in mainstream media at the moment because it's not the big priority or the big story at the moment, and it's sort of taken a sideline. But Boris Johnson's government's actually done quite a good job in these talks. I've been quite impressed with. Well, it's not so much Boris himself in the talks; it's more David Frost, our chief negotiator in the Brexit talks, have been really strong, and Boris, I can't really say Boris has been strong because he's not really been the one negotiating, but on support, well, of course, Dave Frost is doing it on behalf of Boris Johnson in a sense. So, and Boris Johnson's backing him up and supporting him in the talks, and a lot of directive is coming from Boris and Downing Street. So, yes, the government is doing quite strongly in the talks. They're keeping their guns. Um, this didn't get plastered all across the news, but the negotiations to do with our fisheries policy, we stuck to a gun saying, nope, you're not allowed free access to our waters. The EU weren't happy and kicked up screams. President Macron was unhappy and kicked up a stink. But we stuck to our guns and the EU finally caved. Oh, your camera's gone off.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, just give me 1 second.
So, and also in the news, we said we weren't going to extend no matter what, despite Keir Starmer,
Sorry, there was a spider in the corner. I had to get rid of it quickly.
Despite Keir Starmer calling for, and a bunch of other Labour MPs calling for an extension to the Brexit talks because Corona's going to, impact it or whatever. Just an excuse for us to remain in the EU for a bit longer.
Yep.
Though we said by the end of June, July, we were going to decide whether we're going to stick to the talks or abandon them. Well, of course, we've done a lot of movement of preparing for no deal, WTO, Brexit, just in case. We've made actually serious plans and steps towards that direction. But we've also said we're going to keep the trade talks open, keep them going till the end of December. We initially said we're going to reach a point in July where, we're going to just cut it off in July if nothing's been done. Boris still says there's a good chance we can get it done by July. Though he's not, but though we're not going with the position where we're walking away in July. We're going to keep going till the deadline, but beyond that, we're not going to extend.
I think it's a good idea, actually, keeping your options open. I see why he said the July date, because that makes sense, work to a specific deadline. However, with all that's been happening, I think you're right, keeping your options open. I mean, there's the problem is the Brexit. I think the Conservative government's handled the Brexit talks really well since the general election. Michael Gove's been quite involved in it because, of course, his main responsibility when he
was for no deal
was no deal preparations, and he's done a lot of work. And even if you don't like Michael Gove, you can't argue that he's not a good politician and knows what he's on about, because he obviously does.
Yeah.
I think, look, Keir Starmer wants us to remain in the EU. He's already said that he would have, if a second referendum happened, he would have voted for Remain. So there's no doubt Labour want us to remain in the EU for as long as possible. And Hilary Benn and the Brexit committee all want us to extend the deadline. Because and it's quite funny because you don't really hear about it in the news anymore, because Brexit is no longer a very dominant issue. I think everyone's come to the conclusion that we will be leaving.
Yeah.
The only problem I can see is you still have, and I used to respect this man, I don't really respect him anymore. You still have people like Nigel Farage who are trying to remain relevant by saying this isn't Brexit. Nigel Farage has said he's gonna get the Brexit party up and running again. He's going to come for Boris and his voters. And it's like, just go away. You don't really have much of a purpose in British politics anymore. You're not an MEP. You're not really relevant. So I think that, will we get a deal with the EU? If the EU continue their stance they've got now, then it looks like we're heading for a no-deal Brexit. If they cave in, which is possible, because especially France use our fisheries quite a lot, so that's why Macron is kicking up a bit of a stink about
because they
all of this
wanted
at the
free
moment.
access.
It all depends if the EU caves in and gives us what we want. Because if they don't do that, then we'll most likely leave with a
Well,
no deal.
things have shifted towards
So,
going back to the initial, how we initially started off the Brexit negotiations, all the way back with Theresa May, where they said, "Oh, that you can have like a Canada-style trade agreement," but Theresa May said, "No, we want to be, best buddies still, and in bed with each other." But
closet remainer.
yeah,
Yes, sir.
so but the EU's now going, despite them going, "No, you can't have that anymore." They're now going back to the stance of the Canada-style trade agreement. So we're slowly getting
Yeah.
back to where we should be, and the UK has already said a Canada-style arrangement we're more than happy to accept. So come on, pull your finger out, get to work.
That's what many wanted anyway.
Yeah,
But as you said, Theresa May seemed to think she didn't want that, so
she didn't want Brexit. Full stop.
so it all went wrong. But we know what happened to her.
Yeah, she
So anyway,
she's
I think moving on to news on the other side of the pond. I think they say.
Oh, we're
don't
going to
they?
take a flight over. Go on, get on our Ryanair budget airline because we can't
Yeah.
we can't afford the capitalist scourge of airline travel because
Yep, and you shouldn't be using Virgin after all, because that's owned by Richard Branson, who of course
yeah,
is
no
is
British Airways, no capitalist scourge. Because we're hardline socialists now. We're gonna go protest in
So
London or something.
uh, this is the news which the media would like you to believe, that Donald Trump has already lost the presidential election in November due
Yeah,
to recent polls. Now, a couple of things are a little confusing about this. Number one, the presidential race hasn't even really heated up yet because it's in November, so it usually heats up throughout the summer.
yeah.
And then they haven't even had debates yet, which I think will be very interesting to see. The second point is everyone says all the media outlets are saying Trump's lost, but they don't mention he's lost to Joe Biden. No
No,
one's mentioned Joe Biden's name. Maybe because the media know how many gaps he makes when they put him on TV. So they're trying to just keep him under wraps and just say Donald Trump's lost.
I've
Yeah.
seen this a lot of people all over Twitter complaining about Donald Trump, saying, "Right, so the best thing we all need to do is Trump's this, and that. So what we all need to do is go out and vote for real change." What they don't say is go out and vote for Joe Biden because he's
Real
going to. What's Joe Biden actually going to do?
real change.
He's not Donald Trump, so yeah, you vote for him.
Joe Biden, real change. An over 70-year-old politician who's been in politics for the last half a century.
He doesn't stand for actual change.
He's changed. He's not the establishment candidate. No way. Shut up. Who are you? So, and I've noticed that you don't see Joe Biden for the simple reason Joe Biden is not interesting. He's less interesting than Hillary Clinton was. I mean, some people actually genuinely believe Joe Biden is senile. They've said,
Yeah.
"How the hell can you have this guy in charge? He's not up to be president." And I have to agree with them because he stumbles over his words so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen clips of him debating, and oh my god, it is sad. And there was an image of like two rallies, a Joe Biden rally and a Trump rally, and it was showing the audiences. Joe Biden's rally had probably 2 or 3 people there. This was like just before it started, probably about 10 minutes before it started. So there was about 2 or 3 people there. Trump's rally must have had thousands there queuing up to hear Donald Trump speak, and that's the problem. Biden is not exciting. There is nothing about. Well, I mean, I don't see Biden really attacking Trump on any policies.
No.
He seems to kind of stand there. He wears a face mask to show he's involved in coronavirus, but that's about it. He doesn't really have.
Yeah, the only
I'd love to
thing
know.
Joe Biden's got going for him is that he's not Donald Trump.
Yeah, like Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton ran on a similar platform to that near the end of her campaign.
Yeah.
I'm not Donald Trump. Look what happened to her. And everyone seems to think Trump's out of this race. It's going to be a landslide. Joe Biden's going to win. Personally, I don't know who's going to win. I think it's too close to call. It's going to be close. I think I don't see Joe Biden winning a landslide, and I don't see Trump winning a landslide. It's going to be a very close race,
Well, it depends if
unless
they're sort of how bad the recession's going to be for America. How bad, if Trump can get the economy back on its feet by November, then possibly. Because Donald Trump's whole thing
yeah.
was a strong economy before the whole coronavirus thing struck. If he's able to get an economic policy that turns things around and gets the economy back to the strong point it was, or back towards that direction, then possibly Trump could get re-elected.
However, Trump does have an ace up his sleeve, and this is using history. Um, Trump is running now as with all the protests that's been happening. He's running as the law and order candidate.
Yeah,
Now, historically, the most primary one I can think of is in like 1968. Richard Nixon ran for the presidency at the time of all the anti-Vietnam War riots and the similar equality riots, and he won that running on a law and order platform. If Trump's running on a law and order platform, and let's say if you look at stuff from America as a I'm not saying, but as a let's just say a middle class voter who's got a wife and a family, goes to work 5 days a week, just wants a normal life. You turn on your TV and you see all these riots all over the place, and you fear for your family. Who are you going to vote for? Trump, who's running on a platform of law and order and doubling down on all these protests and basically let's just enforce some law, or Biden, who's saying we have to give the protesters everything they want?
yeah.
Who are you going to vote for? Because I
Mm.
don't think it will be Joe Biden, because Joe Biden just doesn't have the charisma to persuade anyone to vote for him. Biden has been heard saying stupid things like black people should be voting for me.
Yeah.
It's like, excuse me, what do you mean they should be voting for you? What is that? Do they not have a choice? do you? And it's little things like that that make me think Biden. The only way he's gonna win this is because he's not Trump. That's like the only way. I don't think anyone will be cheering that Biden's in because he's not a progressive. He's just kind of he's like a British Lib Dem, just like this wishy-washy liberal that doesn't stand for anything.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think the election's too close to call at the moment. We'll know more, in the September, November time.
This
Well,
is
definitely
an
November.
election that's going to be even worse than the 2016 election in the terms of people just looking at the election, just thinking, what's the point?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely going to be like that.
Like, all the people who don't like Trump or want change or whatnot don't have a
Bernie,
choice.
that kind. Of,
Trump's tactic will be to appeal to his core of of the more I don't know, right wing Republican people of the
working.
country. Joe Biden, he will try to appeal to the left, even though he doesn't have any association with the left. But he will try anything just to get votes and seem cool and hip. And I don't know, he's got nothing. He's not got an actual platform apart from as he said, I'm not Donald Trump. You don't like Trump. Vote for me, sort of thing. That's the only thing.
I wouldn't be surprised if voting turnout goes down,
Yeah,
because I think people are disillusioned, as you said. People who don't like Trump really don't like Trump and won't vote for him. But Biden's kind of running as that hip granddad who kind of knows nothing about modern culture and just makes you cringe. I mean, there's been a couple of moments where you really cringe because he's trying to be modern and popular, and it's not what some politicians like Bernie Sanders could pull that off maybe, but
yeah.
he's not that. He can't
He's
pull
not
that
there.
off. I think as you said, it's going to be for Americans, it might be an even harder choice than the 2016 election.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I don't live in America anyway. I'm glad I
Thank
live in the
God for
UK.
that.
We got a strong government who, very secure.
Mind you, it could be argued Donald Trump as well in this handling of the whole Corona situation's not been good either.
It's not been good. I think he's gotten better in recent weeks,
You
but
know,
it's,
he
it's
said
it,
some. He has said some quite stupid stuff recently, though. Not gonna lie.
drinking
Did
bleach
you
was
hear
probably.
what he said about, you know, about testing and number of cases?
Oh yeah, didn't he
Where he
say something
said,
along the line?
he goes, "You're not
Stop.
gonna have if we won't have if we don't test, then we don't have a high number of cases."
Yeah, that's basically a blindfold on. It's not happening. No, it's that kind.
He said there
It's
are
that.
no cases if you don't test for them.
Yeah, he has said some stupid things. But personally, I would wonder if that was a joke when he
Yeah,
said that.
and he says
And
a lot of stuff to get people riled up.
it's like the bleach thing. I think that was meant to be a joke. The
Yeah,
problem is the media are not on his side
no,
because he's not. He shouts at the media and has a go at them. So the media just kind of edit things to
he's
make it
hated by
sound
him,
like.
but that's why people liked him.
Yeah. So who knows? The media have already said he's lost. It's up to the American people to see what the real outcome will be. The media
Honestly,
just
it
know.
depends on a couple of things: the state of the U.S. economy come November,
Yeah.
how senile Joe Biden gets in the debates, and whether he actually has a
Yeah.
platform and any policies to actually bring forward
The
to the
debate.
American people.
The debate. The debates would be fun. I don't usually watch any other debates from any other country except ours, but I might just watch one of the US debates just to see
I've only
how
watched like the
bad.
highlight reels.
I just want to see how bad Joe Biden is. I want him to kind of say he'll just sit there and say, "Vote for me and not President Obama." Joe, don't you mean Donald Trump? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm.
yeah. I've seen a lot of his
Yeah.
speeches where he just tries to say something, then he just completely forgets what he's going on about and goes, right, we're going to stop the um um um. I forgot what I'm gonna I've seen a lot of times Joe Biden forgets what he's gonna say.
He says fact a lot. I've watched this like
Fact.
3-minute videos of information, and he says the fact of the matter is, and he says it so many times. The fact of the matter is, the fact of the matter. And the weird thing is, he said a couple of weeks ago something about fact isn't important, truth is. It's like, well, if fact's not important, why do you keep saying fact all the time? Doesn't
Fact.
I'd love to know who's running his campaign.
Oh god.
Who's running? Who I oh, it'll be interesting to see. That's more than so.
Yeah. God. Aren't you glad you don't live in America?
Well, yes, I mean we have protests in this country, but in America,
Protests
they're a
and
lot
stuff.
less.
Always fun.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of that, I think the last thing I'm gonna say, or last thing I want to talk to you about, is the protests in this country because, of course, they've
Yay.
died down a little bit since we last spoke.
A little bit.
Yeah, they're still a bit insane. I don't think half of them really know what they're protesting about
No.
anymore. And
No, that's a big thing we get in that we talk about the Black Lives Movement in the UK, or how you see it's taking a turn, and that's what I want to chop in.
yes,
Have you seen
yes,
on the Black Lives Matter group? I forgot what the actual group is, like the official UK, Black Lives Matter UK, they're an official registered group and whatnot. Turns
right,
like where you
yeah,
can donate because we're fight because Black Lives Matter and all that stuff, and promoting that message and how everyone thinks. But it turns out the group itself isn't just promoting equality for black and ethnic minority groups.
me and Matthew fully agree. Let's just
Turns
get that.
out the Black Lives Matter UK movement group is a hard left Marxist group calling for the end of capitalism.
Yes, yes. I read
An
something
alternate
along.
agenda that
They want to
they've
destroy.
hijacked it.
and they want to abolish the police, don't they?
Yes.
That's one point. It's, first of all, abolish the police. Well, how would that work?
Abolish
What do you have?
capitalism.
Do you have gangs running certain sections of the country? If you go into Cambridge, for example, is there a massive gang that
Hmm.
runs that? And if you go into Norfolk,
Baron of
that sounds
Cambridge.
that sounds like Northern Ireland and how that works, rather than how we work in England. I don't see how you can abolish the police. I don't know how that is going to solve anything. And this thing about destroying capitalism, well, it kind of just shows that this is all run by radical left wing professional protesters. These are probably the same
Yeah.
Marxist followers who were out protesting about the climate change emergency and the anti Brexit demonstrations. They're probably the same people going on these Black Lives
Yeah.
Matter movement. For those who support Black Lives Matter, I'm not saying that you're wrong. However, what it's become, it's missed the initial point. It was about equality.
I still
Now it's
think it
become,
is, but you've seen groups like the Black Lives Matter UK group hijack the movement to promote not just equality between races, but their Marxist, anti-capitalist agenda, which I think protesting a movement which, don't get me wrong, like Black Lives Matter, it's an important topic and one we support. Equality for the black community is very important, but then to try and use that, the initial outrage of, police brutality, the killing of George Floyd, to promote your, very politically charged idea of
yeah,
how, capitalism should be abolished, when people are complaining about, black community should be treated better by, enforcement, which was the whole topic. And now you got groups like that hijacking the core message for their own
yeah.
political agendas, which I think is
Let's
wrong.
get it straight. Let's get it straight off the back. These people want to destroy capitalism and establish some kind of socialist communist society, which historically, let's face it, does not work. Look at the
Yeah.
Soviet Union, for example. Communism doesn't work because it just gets corrupt, maybe even more corrupt than capitalism gets. Because in people's hearts, and I'm in people's hearts, no one wants to be have the same amount of money as everyone else. If you work harder than 10 other people and you earn more money than 10 other people, and then you have to share that money out equally between those 10 other people and yourself, how is that fair? Because you've worked harder. Surely if you've worked harder, you deserve to have more money
Yeah.
than those that haven't worked harder. Now, I'm not saying about, there is still equality in this country, ethnic inequality, class inequality, there is still inequality. However, I'm just talking about if two people if two people are doing a job and one works harder than the other, they deserve more money than the one who didn't work as hard. I'm sorry, but replacing capitalism and replacing it with communism, I don't know what that has to do with racial equality. I don't know how communism makes racial inequality go away. I don't think it does. I don't see what. I don't even understand how you can relate both to one
No, they're
another.
just
It's,
trying to hijack the movement to promote their own political ideologies, which I think is wrong.
and we've seen the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, some groups are now calling for, like, Gone with the Wind, Little Britain, 40 Towers to all be taken off streaming services because they're racism and all of that. And I think the movement's completely lost what it was originally about. It's about equality. I support I supported Black Lives Matter when it was about equality, but in the UK especially, it's kind of morphed into this more let's have less just it's got out of control.
Yeah.
I think it's got out of control. It's forgotten what its principles are, and I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
support violent protests, and I don't support removing comedy programs or films just because a group of people doesn't like them. Just don't watch them.
Yeah.
Uh, let's just hope these protests calm down soon. That probably won't happen, but we can only hope, I suppose.
Well, one can only hope. Anyway, guys, this on that happy note, this is where we're going to conclude today's TPN podcast. I think we should make a movement to always end on a happy story. And all this bullshit's going on in the world, I think we should do more and look at a happy topic.
Yes, we should.
One
At
of
a
those
happy
topics
topic.
that I will briefly touch on is Boris had his birthday the other day and had a lovely cake with strawberries.
Yes. Always good to end on.
Always good to end on Boris and cake. There we go. Look at that happy chap with his cake. Yeah.
I don't know how anyone could hate Boris. I think he's great. You know, he's a
Yes.
really good prime minister. He's got the common touch, if that makes sense.
Yes.
He's very in tune with people.
Anyway, this is where we're going to end then. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for Tommy as usual for joining us.
Yep. We promised to do more regular TPNs.
We always promise, but whether
Well, we did.
stick-
At one point, yeah, but that was at one point we were doing one every week. Oh, that was during the election though, so that was like
yeah,
news
you know,
every like.
we'll get up there. Maybe twice a week. Well, no. We're not gonna go there just yet.
No,
But
Matthew's-
hopefully one day we can. One day we can with Tommy and we get our affairs sorted. In check.
affairs. Sorry, I didn't know you were business affairs. What are you talking?
Business affairs and all that stuff. You know, I'm a very committed man
Yes.
with all my business projects.
Yeah, yeah. How much money you earning from all those?
Yeah, at least we're committed. I'm like,
Yeah. Oh, yes. No, we can't
we're
say
committed
that.
to our YouTube channel.
Yes, commitment.
And now,
of
okay,
YouTube.
okay, we saw. Okay, so we didn't quite get, you know, our upload where we're gonna say we're gonna upload, you know, once a week, but at least we're not left it 2 months. Like, yeah. Anyway,
Let's just establish we've had we've been doing content on this channel for over a year and we haven't changed the name yet. So you know we're doing well.
yes.
We're doing well compared to some other channels which I cannot talk about on
legal
live.
reasons. Anyway, guys, I think we're gonna get some out of here before we you know, get sued.
Yeah. Yeah. Bye then, everyone.
So goodbye, everyone. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next TPN podcast, which hopefully will be next week,
Yes, hopefully it will.
next Sunday.
Bye.
Okay. Tommy's locked in. Didn't give him time to consent, but there we are. Goodbye, everyone.